Hi, and welcome to Why Do Countries Exist? The Top 10 Elections of 2021. Welcome to the most clickbait episode of this podcast so far. I'm sure by now you thought you had seen all possible clickbait there was in the world. Well, apparently you were wrong. So I'll look at 10 of what could be the most important elections of 2021. I'll put some background information and try to explain why it is so important, along with which players will be involved. I'll also put a little disclaimer right up front, saying that it's very possible that none of these elections will matter at all. They could result in the powers that be remaining exactly where they are with no real significant change in the country. I could be underestimating the importance of some other election. They could just not happen at all due to COVID or other circumstances in the country. Or there could be a new election announced in September of this year that is 1,000 times more important than any of these that I just don't know about yet. But these are what I think are going to be the big elections that you may see in the news or prove to be a turning point in that country's history. Number 10. The Hong Kong Legislative Assembly election. Now, Hong Kong has been in the news since 2019, with protest over a new security law that would give China greater control over its special administrative district of Hong Kong. Now that the bill is passed, China now has far greater legal powers and has punished several important pro-democracy lawmakers. Many have been arrested, and as of right now, a lot of seats in the Legislative Assembly are vacant, with the pro-Beijing lawmakers given almost total control over the assembly. The election was originally scheduled for 2020, but delayed officially to halt the spread of COVID. Opinion polling shows pro-democracy parties projected to win at least a plurality of the votes. However, Hong Kong has a strange electoral system, with half of the seats coming from the 35 electoral districts that you vote on based on where you live, so pretty standard stuff. But also another 35 seats that come from functional constituencies that you can only vote in depending on what job you have. This is widely believed to give the pro-Beijing side an advantage in reaching a majority, and it's very likely China will make it difficult for pro-democracy candidates to participate in elections. We could very easily see Hong Kong become more like Macau, where there is an opposition, but it's significantly reduced. The election is currently scheduled to take place on September 5th. Number 9. The Libyan general election. Libya hasn't had an election since 2014, and shortly after that election, full-blown civil war erupted in the country. Right now, several different factions are fighting for control of the country, with the largest being the House of Representatives based in Tobruk and backed by Russia, Egypt, and Chad, and the Government of National Accord, based in Tripoli, backed by Turkey, America, and Qatar. Now, this election has been promised since 2018, and has been pushed back to 2021, where hopefully it'll happen, but it'll honestly just depend on how the war there goes. If an election actually happens, there may be a chance for peace in the country that has seen violence since 2011. The election will have the presidency of Libya and 200 seats of the House of Representatives voted on. Some of the biggest candidates for the presidency include Khalifa Haftar, the military head of the Tobruk government, Al-Rifra Al-Ifnaidid, a human rights lawyer, and Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, son of former Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi. The election is scheduled to take place on December 24th, or Christmas Eve. Number 8. The Norwegian parliamentary election. Norway has since 2013 been run by a conservative government, headed by Erna Solberg. The Conservatives have been supported by the Liberal and Christian Democratic Party. They had also previously seen the backing of the Progressive Party, a party that is divided between a quasi-libertarian wing and a more nationalistic anti-immigrant wing. In January of 2020, the Progressive Party left the government due to immigration disputes. Opposing this conservative government is a broadly left-wing coalition. They are headed by the Labour Party, the main center-left party in the country, along with the Agrarian Center Party and the Socialist Left Party. Smaller parties present are the Environmentalist Green Party and the Red Party, a mix of communist and radical socialists. The election is significant due to the fact that right now, it seems unlikely the right will continue to hold on to power, as the center, socialist left, green, and red parties all have seen a significant rise in the polls, while the right-wing parties all have seen a decrease in their polling numbers. All 169 seats will be voted on September 13th. Number 7. The Peruvian general election. Since 2017, Peru has been in a political crisis. The president at the time, the center-right Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, was accused by the Congress of Peru, the legislative body of the country, of corruption and vote buying, and after much bickering, he ultimately resigned in March of 2018. He was succeeded by Martin Vizcarra. Vizcarra had to deal with a hostile Congress during his term, which made it difficult for him to govern. The opposition accused him of corruption and moral failing, and managed to impeach him in November of 2020. However, Vizcarra's impeachment led to massive protests in the country, with many of those on the left and in the center seeing his overthrow as illegitimate. Vizcarra was replaced by Manuel Minero, who started creating a hard right-wing government. He resigned after only 5 days, however, due to massive protests in the country. Peru is currently led by a caretaker president, Francisco Sagasti. Whoever wins the election will have to take control of a country that is struggling with continued protest, COVID, and economic uncertainty. The 5 leading figures right now for the president are the center-right George Forsyth, centrist Julio Guzman, hard-right conservative Keikito Fujimori, who is the daughter of former president Alberto Fujimori, socialist Veronica Mendoza, and populist Daniel Urresti. The first round of the presidential elections and the elections for the 130 seats in Congress will take place on April 11th, with a second round if no candidate receives 50% of the vote in June. Number 6. The Bulgarian parliamentary election. Since July 2020, Bulgaria has seen massive anti-corruption protests directed at the conservative government led by Boyko Borislav. His party, GERB, has seen a massive loss in the polls, being down 8 points from the 2017 election result. His allies in government, the Nationalist United Patriots Coalition, also have lost support, and the populist party, Voya, looks unlikely to reach the 4% threshold required to enter parliament. The main opposition party, the center-left Bulgarian Socialist Party, hasn't seen the huge lead in the polls either, with it dropping slightly below its 2017 number, and the center, Movement for Rights and Freedom, only seeing a minor increase. Bulgaria has a long history of corrupt politicians, with just about every party every single year arguing that they will be the party that will finally get rid of all the corruption in the country, however unlikely that will be. A new populist party, There Are Such People, has seen a rise in the polls, so maybe they can play kingmaker. Whether Boyuslav continues to rule or the Bulgarian Socialist Party gets its turn in government, they will still have to deal with a country that is one of the worst qualities of life in the EU and a huge population decline. The election for 240 seats in parliament will take place on March 28th. Number 5. The Israeli legislative election. Israel has had 3 elections since April of 2019, with the fragmented nature of Israeli politics to blame. In the Knesset, or the legislature of the country, there are around 20 different political parties present, each vying for power with some in coalitions with each other and others split based on their position on the government. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of the country since 2009, has been a fairly controversial figure, both in and outside of Israel, as he has been accused of corruption and of committing war crimes against the Palestinians. It is unclear if he will be able to retain a working majority once the election is over. His conservative party, Likud, is however leading in the polls, followed by the New Hope Party, a breakoff of Likud. After that there is the centrist Yesh Ati Talemum coalition, the right-wing Yanama coalition, and then the Joint List coalition, that mainly promotes the interest of Arabs in Israel and has communist, Islamist, and pan-Arabist among its ranks. The election for 120 seats is scheduled to take place on March 23rd. Number 4. The Iranian presidential election. Iran has probably one of the most unique political systems in the world. While most democracies are based along liberal democratic lines, Iran's democracy is based on Shia Islamic lines. There is a democracy, it's just the Shia clerical elites hold a vast majority of the power, and all parties present in the country can't challenge the status quo too much. Iran politically is divided between 2 main factions: the conservatives, who want to uphold the political status quo and pursue a more confrontational foreign policy with America, and the reformists, who want to move Iran towards a more liberal democracy and holds less confrontational views towards the West. The presidency of Iran is the highest elected office in the country. The current president is Hassan Rouhani, belonging to the reformist camp and helped create the Iran nuclear deal. However, in the 2020 legislative elections, the Iranian conservatives crushed the reformists due to very low turnout, which benefited the conservatives, and the collapse of the Iran deal. Only one candidate so far is officially running, so figuring out who might win is difficult. Whoever wins, they will oversee one of the biggest players in Middle Eastern politics, and will shape the region's history. The election will take place on June 18th. Number 3. The Chilean elections. Since 2019, Chile has experienced massive protests, fighting against the continued rising cost of living and economic inequality in the country. The protest proved of a fairly wide range of public support, with over 1 million protesting in October of 2019, and forced the government to hold a referendum on changing the constitution, which passed in 2020. On April 11th, Voters in Chile will vote on a constitutional convention, which will then write the new constitution. Then, on November 21st, voters will vote in the presidential and congressional elections. The two main candidates for president so far are Joaquin Lavín from the conservative UDI party and Daniel Hueda from the Communist Party of Chile. Most candidates and parties are arguing along populist lines, hoping to cater to voters dissatisfied with the current system of Chilean politics. While Chile has one of the best economies in South America, many in the country stress over financial concerns, along with dealing with indigenous land rights and the history of right-wing authoritarianism in the country during the 70s and 80s. Number 2, the German general election. Germany is one of the biggest players in the EU, with it having the largest population and the biggest economy in the Union. Whatever happens in Germany will affect the rest of the Union. The German elections will also be big, as after the election, Angela Merkel will step down as Chancellor of the country, having led Germany since 2005 under Christian Democratic-led government. The current ruling coalition is made up of the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Union. The coalition could hold after the election, but both parties will likely try to explore other avenues to get the best deal for their own parties. The other parties present in the Bundestag, or German legislature, are the German Nationalist Alternative for Germany, the Liberal Free Democratic Party, the Socialist Die Linken, or Left Party, and the environmentalist Green/90s Alliance. Currently, things are looking pretty good for the Christian Democrats, with them polling above their last election result, something that is fairly remarkable considering the last 10 to 20 years of EU politics have seen center-right parties losing ground every single year. The environmentalist Greens also are polling well, while all the other parties seem to be losing ground. The federal election will take place on September 26th. There also will be state elections in 5 German states throughout the year. Before we go to our number 1 spot, I'll list some honorable mentions. First off, there's America. As I'm recording this, the Senate elections in Georgia just finished up, and the fact that the 2 Democrats won means it'll be far easier for the Biden administration to pass laws and control the Senate. There also will be governorship races at the end of the year in Virginia and New Jersey, along with several mayoral elections, with the biggest occurring in New York City. The UK will have local elections on May 6th, with the election used to test the public feelings towards the Conservative government. There also will be elections in the capital London for mayor and city assembly, along with regional elections for the Scottish and Welsh Parliament. India, being the largest democracy in the world, will have several important state elections. These will take place in Assam, Tamil Nadu, Karelia, Puducherry, and West Bengal. This will, similar to the UK and US elections, test the public feelings towards the government there. Kyrgyzstan had an election in 2020, but widespread voter fraud led to many in the country to protest, and eventually the government was forced to hold a second election in 2021. There also is a presidential election and a constitutional referendum on January 10th, which realistically will happen before this video comes out. Russia will hold legislative elections along with state and local elections on September 19th. It is very likely the pro-Putin United Russia Party will sweep the elections like it usually does, but the party has seen a decrease in the polls, while the Communist Party has seen a steady increase. So now, number 1, the Ethiopian general election. Ethiopia is one of the biggest players in Africa, with it having the largest population and economy on the continent, helping dominate African geopolitics. The country has since 1991 been under the rule of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, originally a Marxist party, but they've kind of shifted towards having no real discernible ideology. However, the front was dissolved in 2019, with the Prime Minister of the country, Abiy Ahmed, creating the Prosperity Party, a party that promotes liberalism and broad Ethiopian nationalism. The country since 1991 has been under a policy of ethnic federalism, with each of the major ethnic groups in the country given its own federal state that runs its own affairs, with the Tigray ethnicity in particular holding a disproportionate amount of power in the country. Ahmed, an Oromo, has tried to unite the Ethiopian people under a single identity and break down ethnic barriers the country has. This has resulted in conflict with the Tigray People's Revolutionary Front, the ruling party of the Tigray region. In November of 2020, conflict broke out in the Tigray region, with the Ethiopian army invading. The conflict is still ongoing, with violence spreading to other parts of the country. The election will see what direction Ethiopians wish to pursue. Whatever they pick, it will dramatically impact the course of history for the Horn of Africa. The election was originally scheduled for August of 2020, but was officially halted due to COVID, and has since been delayed until June 5th, 2021. So those are the top 10 most important elections that I think will occur in 2021, or at least what I think will be the most important. Do you agree or disagree with me? You can let me know in the comments if you're on YouTube. You can send me an email or you can angrily talk to whichever person is right next to you. I'm sure they really want to hear all about how the Liechtenstein parliamentary election is really going to shake things up in Europe. So yeah, that's the video. I'm working on the next episode, the history of Bangladesh. I'm probably 2/3 of the way done. I'm not 100% sure how much longer it'll take or when it'll come out, but I'm working on it. I'm excited for it. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't really know about, so that's cool. Nice learning about new stuff on this podcast. I also have a new mic. I don't know if this mic is good or if it's better than the last one. We'll see. Maybe you'll angrily tell me in the comments, or maybe you won't. I don't know. Anything could happen. But yeah, thanks for watching. You can send me an email at whydocountries.exist@gmail.com for your thoughts, comments, suggestions, or hate mail. Take care. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.